With Cold War's life coming to an end, it's time to give our farewells on the game and give one last review over the game after 1 year of constant support. Now, if you haven't seen the final review of mine before, then the way we do this is that we go over every mode in the game and give a respected rating and review for each, and then we come to a general overview of the game and one last rating for it. So without delaying anymore, let's just get straight into it. So, starting off with the campaign in Cold War was one of those campaigns that could have been so much better than it was. Knowing that this game was a direct sequel to Black Ops 1, I had very high hopes for the campaign, and I wasn't necessarily disappointed by the campaign, I was just let down from what I thought the campaign was going to be. The best way I could honestly describe this campaign is if Black Ops 1 had an incredibly mid-story with the gameplay aspects of Black Ops 2. The story is more in line with Black Ops 1 obviously, and then there's just the more freedom of Black Ops 2, and by that I mean it's not as linear and you have much more availability when it comes to things. The main thing for not being as linear though was the thing that was advertised pretty heavily, which was side missions where you could do those in the campaign for extra stuff, and honestly, they were pretty useless. They were just multiplayer maps with objectives on it, and that was pretty much all there was to it. The actual missions themselves though weren't bad. They weren't like come back in a couple of years in the future to replay them good, but they weren't bad. I think if the campaign had more meaning in the side missions and more story in the side missions and the actual story was crafted a little bit more, I think this would have been a lot better. It was also one of those campaigns where your actions dictated the ending, but really they didn't, besides who would just be in the last mission and what ending you got, which really that ending all came down to the second last mission where you choose to be bad or good, and that's the ending you get. You either get the good ending if you want to be good, or the bad ending if you want to be bad. There are only two endings, and sadly, the bad one is better than the good one, which is a little crazy to say. Overall though, this campaign wasn't bad by any means, it just wasn't as good as I hoped for, and especially coming off Modern Warfare 2019's campaign, it was just a little bit disappointing. Giving it an overall rating though, I would have to give this campaign a 7 out of 10. Nothing special, just kinda mid. Moving into zombies though, this game mode was really good for what it was, yet somehow it still failed in my personal opinion. Zombies, when the game first came out, was great. We had a new PAP system and a new map that was an expansion of Nocturne and Tone, and then we also had a new perk system, and everything was just great at the beginning. Then, we got a new map that was also kinda good, and a new map we haven't seen before. That was fun for about a week. Then, we went 6 months with no new map. Half a year with almost zero zombies content besides some field upgrades and an outbreak mode, which was cool for maybe 2 days. And it wasn't like the maps were great like Shadows of Evil or something, they were incredibly mid maps that were cool to play once in a while. This is really where zombies died in this game, because everything was just getting content besides zombies. Finally though, sometime in July we got Mare de Tone, the new zombies map, which wasn't that bad. The Easter egg was cool, and the map was fun to play for the most part. The only problem with this map that I had, and the other two in this game, were that they got incredibly boring after a while, and there was nothing to do in the map, and it felt like the maps didn't have any personality to them. It also didn't help that Mare de Tone was just a campaign map, but expanded on. So after this map came out, we were left with one map left, and that was Forsaken. Once again, a campaign map that was just expanded on. This map though was cool and not that bad, and the Easter egg was cool, but once again, there was nothing to do on the map and it got stale after a while. That's really the reason I think Cold War Zombies failed, because there was little to zero personality in the maps themselves, and half of them were just campaign maps, and the story was incredibly uninteresting and pretty useless. There's not even characters in the maps, it's just your operators and sometimes some random people talking for a second. Do you know how boring it is to hear your operators say the same thing for hours on end doing absolutely nothing for the story? It was terrible, and I don't know why they went that way with the story. The actual gameplay was fun, but that was about it. The perks were cool. You had the basic ones you always have, and then you had the DLC ones, which were pretty much useless. We had Tombstone, which was a cool meme for a couple days, but still fairly useless, especially with there being no perk cap anymore, so you can't even do the Tombstone. Not glitch, but like, if you play Black Ops 2 on Town, you know what I'm talking about with Tombstone. But you can't do that anymore. After that, we got Mule Kick, which maybe is good for Dark Aether, but that's about it. Then, we got Death Perception, which does pretty much nothing besides make your UAV faster and show zombies through the walls, also pretty useless. And then we got the last perk, the most useful one out of the bunch, PhD Slider. The only perk that I like that was the DLC perk because it actually had somewhat usefulness and it was a fun perk to have. Don't worry, we don't have Double Tap, but we have Tombstone. Overall, I just think that Cold War Zombies could have been one of the best zombies in the franchise, but was handled so poorly and so incredibly drip-fed content to us that it failed miserably when it shouldn't have. Giving this mode an overall ranking though, I would have to give it a 6 out of 10. Not bad by any means, just very disappointing for what could have been. For multiplayer though, multiplayer in this game was definitely something. In the beginning, multiplayer was arguably unplayable, from crashes to breaking your PC to horrible gameplay and incredibly strict SBMM. The game was just rough. There was an incredible amount of bugs, almost zero content, maybe 8 maps at launch, and an incredibly lackluster final camo that still doesn't work after a year. It was a disgrace to the Black Ops name and hurt Treyarch's reputation. I remember in one of my first reviews I did on the game, I gave it like a 2 or 3 for the multiplayer. But what really kills all drive to play it is the SBMM. It's just not a fun game, and all the bugs and crashes don't help as well. So while I think they can improve on multiplayer to be a great one, at the moment I would have to give this multiplayer a 2 out of 10, which I didn't want to get into everything about this multiplayer because I think I'm going to do a whole new video on it. This is just like a short review, but multiplayer in this game is just not good whatsoever. It was just terrible. The only good thing about multiplayer was playing GBs with my boys. Thankfully, after some time though, the game got its main problems ironed out, and it became more playable. Now, the gun balancing was pretty rough and still is to this day. The Stoner and the LMGs in general ran rampant, and when they got nerfed, they didn't really get nerfed. Then you had the tac rifles like the M16 and the AUG that would one burst you no matter where on the body, and fun fact, the M16 still has not been nerfed since launch. Then you also had the snipers. Snipers were absolutely awful. The snipers players didn't like them, and the casual people didn't like them. Sniper players didn't like them because they were incredibly slow for ADSing and they hit markered half the time, and then the general player didn't like it because there's no flinch on snipers. So if you shot a sniper and had every reason to win the gunfight, as long as that sniper could hit their shots, you were losing it because there's no flinch on those snipers. Thankfully, Treyarch did rework snipers a little bit, but they're still pretty awful, so it really doesn't matter that much. The skill base though was insane. It was way worse than Modern Warfare and made the game so incredibly unfun half the time. You either got a camper lobby that was scared to move, or CDL skins with their 74 Us jump shotting you. I have made my opinions on skill base known, so if you're interested you can see that video, but needless to say, it was just way too cranked in this game and was one of the sole reasons this multiplayer wasn't fun. The maps though, they were pretty fun, well, at least the DLC maps, and that's mainly because they were only BO2 maps. If you look at all the DLC maps that were put in the Cold War, 9 of them are remakes, with 7 of those being BO2 maps and 2 being BO1 maps, and then 8 original DLC maps, and most of those DLC maps that are original are incredibly mid. The only standout ones are Deprogram because it's super unique, The Pines because I like the vibe of it, and Apocalypse because it worked very well for competitive hardpoint. And then that was it. The new maps that we got were pretty terrible, and the only good ones were Black Ops 2 maps, but after a while the Black Ops 2 ones got pretty stale because they just kept putting Black Ops 2 ones every season in, and it was just like, I don't want Black Ops 2 maps anymore. If anything, I wanted Black Ops 1 maps because it would make more sense than Black Ops 2, because it's not even like a reimagine, like how, you know, like back in the day they would reimagine the maps. They were just copy and paste. The only thing that may be different is the cars and the TVs. That was it. But moving on, we also had the score streaks, which was awful as well because they tried to fix something that wasn't broken. They made it where you keep your score streak after death and there's a cooldown on the score streaks after each use. Keeping the score was awful because every single game right at the end, the napalms and the artilleries would start hitting and just make the map a score streak lobby. It was also awful because the score streak system felt like it was always working against you with the cooldown and making some of the higher score streaks incredibly high scores, making it almost impossible to get unless you went on a crazy kill streak, which was also incredibly hard to get with the skill base unless you're reverse boosting. Also, should I mention the Air Patrol, the singular most overpowered score streak of all time? The Air Patrol was the only score streak that didn't have a cooldown, that was incredibly cheap score to get, and it would take down anything. You could have gone crazy for a gunship, but if someone had an Air Patrol, you could say goodbye to that gunship. You would go crazy and get like 17 kills for a score streak, then you would have it get taken down by someone that had a score streak that required maybe 7 kills. Then you also had it where you would air patrol, then an enemy would air patrol your air patrol, and then your teammates would air patrol the enemy air patrolling your air patrol. It was just one big cluster. Me and my friend, when we would play, we would both have an air patrol just for that one reason. So when he calls in a harp or something that gets air patrolled, he could use his air patrol, and when that gets air patrolled, I could use my air patrol to air patrol the enemy's air patrolling that's air patrolling him. So hopefully the air patrol just never comes back because it was genuinely awful and made every game terrible. Overall though, for what it was, Cold War's multiplayer was fun at its core, and it was a good arcade style COD, but with every problem in the game and the SBMM, it ruined the experience incredibly. If the game was more in line with a traditional COD, I would genuinely give this multiplayer like an 8 to 9 out of 10, but because it isn't and wasn't nearly as good as it should have been, I'm gonna have to give it a 4 out of 10. Just disappointing overall, and don't get me wrong, I don't hate the game, I just wish it wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel and ruin the experience for decent players. The final mode in this game though, League Play. We waited a solid 4 or so months for this just to have it to be an exact copy and paste from Black Ops 4. That was already a bad system. This game's League Play was awful because the skill base was less strict than pubs for whatever reason, and then the ranks also didn't work for half the game. I remember when the mode came out, I got competitor rank, the lowest rank, and then the very next ladder I got masters, which was the highest rank, which means I was in the top 2%. I went from the bottom 50 to the top 2% in 2 days, so I don't know what to do about that one. And then I was put in elite, which was probably my actual rank, and then randomly they screwed with the ranks and then put me into advanced and then into expert and then back into elite. It was just awful, and it also didn't help that the game rewarded people that played more than people that were just better. But worst of all is that the lobbies were always chalked. I'll throw up some images of my lobbies, and if you look, it's literally a color wheel of ranks. That's not how the game should work. It also didn't help that there was only like 5 ranks, so nobody was ever really in their respectable rank. The game itself though, it was fun, I'll give it that. I enjoyed competing on Cold War, but other than that, the League Play system kinda sucked all around. It also didn't help that it took them half a year to finally add rewards to League Play, most of them pretty useless, but some were a little cool, I'll give them that. So it was nice to get rewarded for playing League Play, but in the end, it was just a lackluster mode. Giving this mode an overall rank though, it would be a 5 out of 10, just multiplayer with more tryhards, and a really terrible skill-based system, and a really terrible ranking system. For my closing thoughts though, this game had many problems throughout its life, and still does. I also wish that the game wasn't drip fed to us because that was pretty awful, and I also wish that there was a normal prestige system than the officer ranks that were just rewarded. It was cool to have a prestige shop to get prestige content, but that's also kind of standard with most CODs, but I think mainly the prestige system was awful because every season you could get up to level 1000 and then you would get reset back to level 1, and you have to restart, so there's really no reason to go for any high level. I started off just getting Prestige Master for the season, and then it slowly turned into me just not playing the game. You can see me go from higher ranks for a while and then going down each season and then just plummeting. It just isn't a cool system, and it's kind of annoying that it's in Vanguard too. But overall, this game could have been so much better, but it was just disappointing in the end and underwhelming. Once again, like Modern Warfare, you could see and feel the potential in this game, and it was just wasted. The only really cool content was in the store for almost half the price of the game, and for the grinders there was almost nothing to do besides get DM Ultra and Dark Aether, and Dark Aether was pretty much useless because every hacker in the game had it, which meant almost everyone had it because people would just buy it off people because hacking was a big problem during this game, and literally everyone had Dark Aether when we all know very well they didn't get it. But then you also have DM Ultra that didn't work on 90% of the guns, and there was also no 100% calling card until 3 days until Vanguard launched, so I don't really count that because that's honestly more insulting than a better late than never scenario. I just wish though that this game could have ran with the momentum that it had because it really was there, they just didn't do anything with it. Once again, Treyarch has another bad game under their name, with BO4 being in the same category of Cold War, even though I still think Black Ops 4 is better. Giving this game an overall rating though, I would have to give it a 5 out of 10. 2 decent modes, both with almost no replayability, and then 2 horrible modes. It evens out, but still, it just could have been better. Thankfully though, Vanguard is starting off strong and has exceeded my expectations, so we'll have to see with that game. But if you did enjoy the video, make sure not to leave without leaving a like and subscribing for more. But until the next final review, see ya.